I got no clever intros to try to keep you around for 60 minutes. If you're not invested in this one, I don't know what the issue is. Appreciate you being here, the voice of college football. Buckeyes live this week on a Thursday, noon Eastern time. And here we go. This is it. Ohio State fans, this is what you expect, not just what you hope for, but what you expect. And this team has delivered to date in spades. It's a national championship game against not the SEC, against Notre Dame. Tony Gerdeman down below, BuckeyeHuddle.com. Buckeye Weekly's the podcast. I guess they probably found time to do one or two this week. Steve Hellwagon right next to me. Bucknuts 247 Sports. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Good.
Doing great.
When are the travel plans?
I'm on a plane tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Get in about 8 o'clock or 8:30 down in Atlanta. Looking forward to it. We've got the team arrival tomorrow night, a media day on Saturday with the entire team, and then the head coaches Sunday and the game Monday night. So, and then back to Columbus on Tuesday. So a pretty hectic next 4 or 5 days, looks like.
We will be leaving, me and Tom Orr and our buddy Marcus Hartman from the Dayton Daily News will be leaving 5:30 in the morning tomorrow morning in a car and hitting our first Buckeyes at around 9 o'clock or so, and hitting Atlanta around 3-ish and checking into the hotel so that we can get over to the airport and take in the arrival of both teams, and looking forward to it. I have not yet. I'll put all of the schedule, the calendar into my calendar, and so that I know what day is what and what's happening. Steve, I've not yet made it to that point, but I will get there before I hit the car.
This has been a crazy last month, I'll have to tell you, beginning with the Tennessee game. And even before that, just all the events and all the interviews and all the different things that have happened. I mean, we've been covering this thing for, this playoff for the last 6 or 7 weeks, and it's been quite an adventure. And quite thankfully, it all comes to an end Monday night when the foot hits the leather at 7:30 by, what would that be, 11:30 Eastern time. One of these two teams, Ohio State or Notre Dame, will be hoisting the trophy. And the first ever 12-team playoff will be in the books. So looking forward to it.
It's been fun. It's been, I think, everything people hope for, other than folks in the SEC territory. But you've gotten to see a lot of matchups that you wanted to see in places that you wanted to see them, and so we've gotten that.
And that's one of my takeaways from this playoff, is that you're looking at 11 games instead of 3, and just to think about all the cross-sectional games that we would otherwise not get to see. Sure, I would love to see Oregon play Notre Dame, for example. There are always going to be matchups out there that you think, okay, if they would have advanced, could they have beaten them? That's always going to be the case, even in the NFL playoffs, but gives us a broader and more justified and confirmed landscape of where conferences stand, and more importantly, where the teams stand. And Ohio State, yes, I've heard all the criticism from a certain fan base I can't identify right now, but it's a fan base out there about 2 losses and national championships not legitimate. You go through 4 of the top 7 teams in the country. That's never been done before. Mm-hmm. This is, yep. And of course, the teams that proceed from here on out to win national championships will do the same, but they will be the first. I guess somebody needs to tell this program each season that there's something special about it. Like it's the first of, the 1998, they came that close to the BCS championship. And then, of course, 2014, the first 4 team, they were there. And now the 12th team, they get there. That's something that keeps repeating itself.
I don't recall when Ohio State won the first one, the 2014 one. Was there this backlash that, you wouldn't have won it in the BCS, though, because you were the 4th ranked team? Like, I don't recall that being an issue, so I don't know why it is now when the playoffs are the way they are. So other than trying to diminish something that has never been done, and I said it before the season, whoever wins it this year will have run the toughest road in the history of college football. And I still think that's the case with Ohio State having to do what they've done or Notre Dame having to do what they've done. Even if Penn State had won out, you would say the same thing about them. Even after their couple of easy games, they're still going to have to finish against Notre Dame and Ohio State, who turned out to be the two best teams in this playoffs based on the fact that they are here. So, everybody eventually finds a difficult matchup, or the strength of schedule certainly ramps up for everybody if you stay in this thing long enough.
Well, it's not going to stop ESPN from, in their minions from declaring Ohio State as the worst national championship team since blah, 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 blah. And, they'll certainly do everything they can to poo-poo this and, say, oh, this team was flawed because they lost to a 6-5 Michigan team, which, we will stipulate for the court. But, hey, you can only play the teams that they put in front of you, and Ohio State regrouped. And Tennessee, Oregon, Texas, and Notre Dame's a pretty good murderer's row, I think, of teams that really were dominant all season long. And so, I think well-deserved if they're able to win this game. And I don't see any reason why they shouldn't. They'll have a well-deserved national championship.
Yeah, I don't think that you had to be some kind of master in whatever you would call this logistics to determine. You don't have to be as good to make the playoffs, but you have to be better in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. So we knew that going in. We knew that months ago. All right, let's get to the matchup.
Mark, why don't we ever diminish the teams that just had to win one game?
Yeah.
Even 2002 Ohio State, all they had to do was beat Miami. All Miami had to do the year before was beat Nebraska. Like that's all they had to do. Like, why don't we diminish? All Florida had to do in 2006 was beat Ohio State. All they had to do in 2008 was beat, Alabama, whatever. Like, they only had to beat one team. Like, come on, that's easy. Anybody could do that.
We could diminish a lot of teams before that started the postseason number 2, number 3 in the country, and were playing number 13 in the country, and just by happenstance got elevated or tied with 3 other 11-1 teams. But the media just seemed to think that they were the best. We could do this, and I do enjoy doing this. So the off season, we will continue through our march through history and litigating the national championship seasons. Okay, down to this one. And before we move on to Notre Dame, obviously Jack Sawyer made that play that will be remembered more so if they win this next game, of course. But Tony, what are your thoughts about the game against Texas? Because I think that this playoff has gone. I know that I've picked every game right, mm-hmm. and it hasn't been that difficult. And that game was Texas. We know that they're worthy, that they have the talent to be there, but Ohio State is playing better because of XYZ. And it took some roller coaster rides to get there in the conclusion, but it pretty much finished the way most believed it would.
Yeah, I had it 28-17 was my score prediction. I didn't expect it to happen the way that it did in getting there, but I think overall the game kind of went as expected. Ohio State was expecting a very difficult, close game, so they weren't going in there thinking they were going to blow anybody out. And so credit Texas for being able to come back and make some plays. But when Ohio State needed to, whether it was the screen pass to Travion Henderson at the end of the second quarter or the drive, they did nothing in the third quarter, but then they drove down in the fourth quarter and had that game-winning touchdown drive where they really instilled their will. And then I think the goal line stand is something that Ohio State has been doing for a while now. And Jim Knowles talked about it. I don't know, Steve, was it you that asked Jim Knowles to go through the entire goal line stand?
Yep.
And he mentioned like the third and the fourth downs the third down was a scheme they haven't run all season long. So that was going to be a brand new look for Quinn Ewers. And he's like, and it worked. So we did it again. And that one worked as well. So I'll credit Steve for that question because Knowles like, yeah, well, we got big on first down, and then we made a play on second down, and then we got in the nickel or on third and goal from a passing down. So they went with something brand new. And you can do that when you've got a veteran defense. You can do that when you've played in a lot of games that haven't come down to the fourth quarter. Ryan Day has talked about overage. They've got a bunch of plays that they've not been able to use in games. So it's just sitting there waiting to be used. It's overage, waiting for it. And Jim Knowles called upon some of it against Texas, and it worked.
Yeah, I think as I watched the game unfold, Ohio State scored early to go up 7-0. And then it was Ohio State stopping Ohio State. It wasn't Texas stopping Ohio State. It was holding penalty, personal foul, holding penalty, personal foul, false start. And in the first drive of the second half, Will Howard threw an interception. So you go scoreless for about 2 full quarters of game action until obviously they got a touchdown there. And it was 14. Well, they get the touchdown right before halftime, I suppose. So the screen pass. And they're up 14-7 at halftime, had all the momentum through the interception. And then, Notre Dame ties it 14-all. Then Ohio State goes up 21-14 with that, just impressive drive down the field. And Judkins powers it in. And, then you get the defensive touchdown. And on that goal line stand, Tui Maloau made a great individual play on first down. Second down, Downs knifed through and hit the running back or held him up a little bit. It was Lathan Ransom and Igbinosun who came in and cleaned it up. And then Jack Sawyer had a pressure on third down to force a pass that appeared before the wide receiver had come out of his break in the back of the end zone, and the ball fell harmlessly. And then fourth down, Jack Sawyer comes unblocked off the right edge, hits Ewers. The ball comes right up to him, and off he goes. So, at that point, the game was over with 2 minutes to go. Ohio State's up 2 touchdowns, and Texas was not coming back from that. So, a remarkable situation. And when you think about it, they had it first and goal at the 1 yard line. If they score a touchdown, does Steve Sarkisian go for 2 there to try and avoid having to go to overtime and try to win the game in regulation, 22-21? And, that was a distinct possibility. But, instead it was Ohio State coming through in the clutch and winning the game, and despite not playing their best game. And so now you go ahead to play Notre Dame here. And, a lot of thoughts about this. I mean, Notre Dame has been in a lot of regards the number 1 college football program in the history of the sport, 11 national championships that they claim. They were great in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 1980s with Lou Holtz. 1988 national championship is their last one. But from 1994 until about 2 weeks ago, 30 years, they did not win a major bowl game. And then they finally broke through and they beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. And they were able, obviously, to beat Penn State in the Orange Bowl. Those are their only 2 major bowl game wins in the last 30 years, and now they're in the national championship game. They did play Alabama in the 2012 national championship game and got beat 42-14. Had Ohio State not been on probation, it would have been Ohio State versus Notre Dame, both undefeated for that championship that year. But it obviously didn't pan out that way. And then they've been in the playoff twice since then and gotten blown out both times. I think Georgia was one of them, and was the other one Alabama or Clemson? Just, raw. I think it may have been Clemson in the other one, because it may have been a rematch from the year that Notre Dame beat Clemson the COVID year. So at any rate, you think about it, it's been a long road here, to get to this point. Is Notre Dame ready for the bright lights? They really haven't showed it historically in the last 30 years. And yet, they're in this position, and it just takes playing one great game of football and capitalizing on Ohio State's mistakes like Texas was not able to. And they pull off the upset of upsets and win their first championship since '88. Not thinking that's going to happen, but stranger things have happened. Ohio State was an 11-point underdog to Miami and beat them 11 or 12. So, yeah, I mean, And of course, Marcus Freeman learned at the foot of the master, Jim Tressel. So that'll tell you.
I'll say about this matchup historically, Steve. Yes, there was a time when Notre Dame was above everyone else with Michigan. And boy, it has been so overwhelming in recent years that I posted a video, ran through all the Winsipedia historical all-time numbers, but then went through 1970 post, which, again, people complain about that. It's 55 years, people. 55 football seasons since 1970. The 21st century, and then the college football playoff era. It's not close. And even now, all time, it is tilted in Ohio State's favor, not decidedly, but better winning percentage, more first-round picks. So out of those 28 categories, so I did all the basic Winsipedia numbers. Ohio State wins 24 of 28 categories in those 4 time frames.
Wow.
And the winning percentage since even 1970, because you think of Notre Dame, they were really good in the 70s and they picked it up in the 80s, obviously after Jerry Faust. It's not close.
But what about in terms of movies?
Yeah, what's the movie count? Good point. That
I will say,
got the one with Keanu Reeves.
Like he's been legitimately a quarterback in 2 Ohio State quarterback in 2 movies, and he's been closer to the actual field at Ohio State than Rudy ever was. Let's just go ahead and say that. Like Keanu Reeves' history as an Ohio State quarterback is much more legitimate than Rudy Rudiger's as a pass rushing specialist for the Irish.
I saw somebody put on Twitter a funny thing debunking the whole Rudy myth and how the guy was even involved in a fraud thing or something or the other in the last 20 years or something, like
allegedly.
Allegedly.
So we go to this Notre Dame matchup. I guess we'll leave Texas alone. I did have some points there, but we got plenty to talk about with the Irish. When sizing up Notre Dame and Penn State, the game we just saw, that turned out to went from pedestrian, kind of like this is close, but it's boring, to ramped up in the second half and became a really nice game.
Yeah.
Those 2 teams, outside of my simple breakdown was they're mirror images of each other, but Riley Leonard's the runner and Drew Aller's the future NFL quarterback. Well, Leonard then was the better passer in the game, and Aller just kind of imploded with the help of the Notre Dame defense. But in this one, it seems to be mirror images of each other. The great tandem running backs, the beat up offensive lines that are making their way through. The defenses are really good on all 3 levels, but the separation is the Ohio State passing game and the explosive wide receivers.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I tweeted this out, but one of my questions is how many of Notre Dame's players would start for Ohio State this year? And it's not a lot. And you could make an argument that nobody would be. I'm not going to make that argument, but feel free to do so if you want out there. But Ohio State has been able to stop the run. Notre Dame has not been running the ball that well in the playoffs. They got their 98-yarder from Jeremiah Love on his second carry against Indiana. But outside of that, they're not doing that well. Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love have carried the ball 53 times in the playoffs, and 33 of those 53 carries have gone for 3 yards or less. So like over 60% of their carries have gone for 3 yards or less, and that's kind of what they are. And the amazing thing is that they're able to operate that way. And against Penn State, when they had 3rd and 3 or shorter, they were 8 for 8 on 3rd downs. They picked up every single short yardage. And if they don't pick it up in this game on 3rd and 2 and it leads to a 4th and 1, they're going to go for it on 4th and 1 if they're, near the 50-yard line. So this is a very slow and steady Notre Dame offense. But if Ohio State doesn't give them short fields, if they don't, Penn State or Notre Dame needs to win the special teams. They need to win field position. They need to win turnovers. And if they don't do those three things, maybe all three of those things, then I don't see a path towards victory for them. These are things that Michigan had to do. Like Michigan's plan is very similar to what Notre Dame can do. I think Riley Leonard is a combination of Davis Warren and Alex Orji. Like he can throw a little bit and he can run. And he's kind of just like what Michigan's quarterbacks are. I think the receivers are a little bit better than Michigan's. Offensive line is, it's a mash unit right now. And I really do think the Notre Dame tackles are going to have a very bad night against Ohio State's defensive ends.
Yeah, I just watched the Penn State game again, and we were all watching it together, Tony and a bunch of us down in Dallas in the hospitality room there at the Westin Las Colinas in the Metroplex, where the media hotel was the night before the Ohio State-Texas game. And it's notable that Notre Dame lost two of their starting linemen during the course of the game, with Rocco Spindler, the right guard, going out, and he did not come back in the game. And Anthony Knapp, the left tackle, went out. And as to my understanding, Knapp is out, will not play in this game. So that puts Tosh Baker, who is kind of like a journeyman fifth-year guy, maybe the starter there. And again, you're starting a backup left tackle against Sawyer and Tuimoloau. That doesn't sound good. You may have to leave a tight end in there to help chip on that. And then on the other side is Emil Wagner from Huber Heights, Wayne, I believe, in the Dayton area, 6'6", 291 pounds. And he had some real problems with Abdul Carter from Penn State in that last game. So pass protection is going to be a problem. But the good news for Notre Dame is that Leonard can step up and run the football if he gets flushed out of the pocket. And not only that, he can run the option. He can keep the ball in the option. He can run the straight quarterback draw. There's a lot of things he can do. And Ohio State's linebackers, which has been a strength of the team the second half of the season with Styles and Simon playing just really some outstanding football, are going to have to be assignment sound against Leonard and spy him. The commentators in the last game, Greg McElroy and Sean McDonough, made the point that Penn State told them that their linebackers had to keep eyes on Leonard at all time just because they knew he was one of the best weapons for Notre Dame's offense. So I think that'll tell you everything you need to know. Very sneakily, they're averaging 38 points a game. I mean, that's, kind of amazing. But, when you look at their schedule, they really didn't play anybody during the regular season. Texas A&M was maybe the best team they played. I mean, a lot of teams like USC, Stanford, so on and so forth that weren't any good this year were kind of littered across their schedule. Georgia Tech gave them a little bit of a tough game, but otherwise – and they lose to Northern Illinois, which one of those fluke things. I'd put it in the Michigan category for Ohio State, just a total fluke thing that, I don't read too much into that. And they've won 13 games since then. So I don't think that really factors a whole lot into your thinking. 4 full months later, I'm not really going to go back and refer to whatever Northern Illinois did. I just presume it was a really miserable day to be a Fighting Irishman. So, I agree with Tony. They got to take a Michigan tact, which is establish the run, stop the run, be great on special teams, get a key turnover. I will say Leonard did throw 2 interceptions against Penn State. But, on the other hand, Christian Gray had one at the end to give Notre Dame field position for the game-winning field goal. So that one kind of cuts both ways. So I know you've watched much more of Notre Dame than I have, Tony. I know you and Kevin had talked about, we're going to watch this game, we're going to watch that game. Did you guys even do shows as you were watching those games? Or
Yeah, we did a rewatch show of the Indiana game, of the Georgia game, and we just dropped the Penn State game last night and this morning. So you can find all of those at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle, or just search Buckeye Weekly on your podcast platforms. But yeah, like throughout, you're learning more and more about what you're seeing. And the one thing that I still don't know, and I want to go watch the USC game, is the 3 games that we've seen, they've not faced a passing offense that can tell us really anything about their corners. Now, freshman corner Leonard Moore was the defensive freshman of the year from the Football Writers Association of America. And he's been pretty good. He's been really good. Christian Gray that you mentioned is a sophomore. He gets picked on. I've compared him to Davison Igbinosun in terms of his ability to grab and get penalties, although IGB has cleaned it up of late. Christian Gray continues to give up some plays and gets called for holding against opponents that he shouldn't be holding, basically, is what I'll say. And Indiana's receivers and the Penn State and Georgia receivers, which there are none. Penn State's receivers didn't even catch a pass in this game. Though Drew Aller and another one of the receivers also they had negative yards receiving because of the play at the end of the game where they were just lateraling the ball back all over the place. So you had one guy with no catches for -3 yards and Drew Aller no catches for -4 yards. But in watching the running game, like I said, they've struggled. So and we just talked about this in the latest episode of the Buckeye Weekly Podcast, which will drop in a couple of days. It's a listener questions episode. So in August and September, Notre Dame averaged 6.2 yards per carry. In October, it was 5.6 yards per carry. November, 7.1 yards per carry. In the playoffs, they're down to 4.1 yards per carry. And when you take away that 98-yarder, they're at 3.2 yards per carry, which is, yes, things are going to get more difficult as the playoffs as you play better teams. But Ohio State's run defense is getting better and better as they're playing better teams as well. So I really do think they're going to have Notre Dame's going to have a difficult time running the ball. I thought Penn State did a good job against Riley Leonard and like spying him, and Abdul Carter was tackling him after a couple of yards. And I think he went for 18 for 56 against Penn State. I think that's a number that if he's around there, I think that's okay for Ohio State, as long as they're not giving up big plays from anybody else. And really, the big plays for Notre Dame's offense came against Penn State's corner slipped and led to a 50-yard touchdown from Jaden Greathouse. And if you just same thing against Michigan, if you just don't give them the game, you will win. Now, Ohio State gave Michigan the game. Don't do that against Notre Dame.
Their draw for the playoff was pretty good. They got to play Indiana, an in-state team, in South Bend, in Indiana's first appearance on the main stage of college football in 50-some years. And, the moment was too big for Indiana. I mean, it was 27-3 until they scored a couple touchdowns late for window dressing to make it 27-17. And I don't think that the quarterback Rourke was quite, 100%, obviously. But they did a great job defensively against a pretty good Indiana, supposedly a pretty good Indiana offense. Then you play Georgia without Beck and hold Georgia to 10 points. That was impressive, I suppose. But again, no Carson Beck. So Georgia's playing a little bit left-handed. Then you play Penn State and play a miserable first half. The quarterback gets knocked out at the end of the first half, Leonard. The backup goes in and drives them down, and they get a field goal, and they're down 10-3 at halftime after they've been outplayed, outworked, out-hit every which way. I mean, Penn State, by all rights, could have been up, 20-3 at halftime as opposed to just 10-3. And, it's kind of like the premise of the Ohio State-Texas game. Penn State allowed them to hang around and steal it. And, Penn State was the better team for, a good portion of that game. But Notre Dame came out like a house of fire in the second half. And it did become an entertaining game. I mean, the teams combined for, I think, 31 points in the fourth quarter, I believe. So that was a lot of fun to watch. And it was who was going to blink last. And as it turned out, it was Penn State. Mired back in there, deep in their own end, should have been playing for overtime or just running the football or whatever. And instead, tried to push the issue, and Drew Aller's not the guy to push the issue with, apparently. So, Notre Dame gets the win, and as we said, on to the big stage for them. And again, are they ready for this moment? We'll find out. Marcus Freeman, a little bit of a subplot there, former Buckeye. Great Buckeye. Obviously, I covered him in his time with Ohio State, 2004 to 2008. Played on some great teams with James Laurinaitis and Malcolm Jenkins and a lot of other, great players back then. So it's going to be, a fun next 3 or 4 days to sort through this and then to finally get on the field down there in Atlanta. The tickets for this game are just crazy. $1,000, $1,500 just to get in the stadium to see this game. I wonder if those prices will come down a little bit once everybody has committed to being in Atlanta. Will those prices come down a little bit? But it's a fascinating setup, no doubt about it.
And Christian Gray and Davison Igbignosin. Yeah, Christian Gray reminds me of like a modern day Everson Walls, feast or famine kind of guy. And the play he made against USC, they were up a score, red zone for USC late in the game. He makes a big pick there, and obviously he picks off Aller. He gets picked on quite a bit, but Igbignosin is in a league by himself when it comes to just his, I don't even want to call it physical approach to cornerback play. It drives me nuts. He is far and away. I think he's up to like 14 PI penalties this year. It's unbelievable. And the officials and how they call that is going to be fairly important.
Yeah, and again, I don't know that there's anybody on Notre Dame that you need to hold at this point. And I said the same thing against Michigan. Like, you can just defend them. That's a thing that you can do. You can just defend them. Texas, Matthew Golden's a very, very good receiver. But overall, like, they're always going to be physical, but they're also watching you. Like, they are watching IGB, and I believe they're watching Christian Gray as well, just to see how handsy those guys can get. And they don't call it on Gray every time, just like they don't call it on Igbinosin every time. But beware. Hey, the one thing we know they won't call is holding on Jack Sawyer. So don't have to worry about that. Nobody's going to get called for holding Jack Sawyer. So go ahead and grab till your heart's content if you're an offensive lineman.
That is the stat I bet you guys have heard that is unbelievable, that Ohio State has had the least number of holding penalties called against the opposition's offensive line than anybody in the country. How is that possible?
Mark, I'll give you another one. The last time an offensive lineman was called for holding against Jack Sawyer was Tulsa in 2021. It was his third game as an Ohio State Buckeye. It was the last play of the game. An offensive lineman was called for holding him, and he has not been held since. Now, there have been a couple of tight ends that held him, but no offensive lineman has been flagged for holding him since then. And I talked to Larry Johnson about it after the Rose Bowl, and he's just like, how is this possible? Basically, like, how can we not get any holding calls? I think the defensive line has been held once this year, if I recall, and it was early in the season when there was a flag thrown. But I mean, you can talk to the refs about it, but you just have to continue to move forward and know that it's going to happen. But like JT Tuimoloau gets out all the time, and he's actually drawn a couple of penalties. Jack Sawyer has not drawn a penalty since the third game of his career, and I believe he actually drew 2 holding penalties that game. One was a tight end, one was the I think the right tackle, but nothing since. It's too bad that guy can't do anything.
Yeah, I thought Kenyatta Jackson got held on one of the touchdowns that the screens that Ewers threw. Looked to me, he was coming off the left edge and kind of got, grabbed around and spun around, away from Ewers. And there were others probably in that game as well. It's just Ohio State did get nailed with 2 holding penalties. And when you looked at it on the replay, you're like, yep, that's holding, so they will call it if it's blatant, I suppose. Ohio State's got to do a better job, got to play a cleaner game. Mm-hmm. And, as we get onto that topic, just with the offensive line, they've got to play a cleaner game. I see with Notre Dame's defense kind of what makes them special. They don't have anybody who's going to jump right off the page at you, but they've got 10 really, really good players, and so they don't have a weak link. It doesn't look to me in terms of oh yeah, this is what you do to beat these guys. So I think for Penn State it was a struggle at times. So Ohio State has got to establish the run early and lean on Notre Dame. And Notre Dame plays a lot of guys on defense. I try and write down all the guys who play. And in that Penn State game, I think we've got about 18 to 20 guys who played a lot of snaps. So they will rotate on all three levels quite a bit. So they'll keep their guys fresh. And even with injuries, they have another guy to put in there. We talk about the offensive line being down two guys. Ohio State's got to exploit that. So we'll see what they come up with that. They got, I read Fox had a really nice column, foxsports.com, kind of saying, okay, if you had to pick the all-star team between these two teams, what would it be? And I think it was like 14 for Ohio State and 8 for Notre Dame. And I agreed with most of it. There were a couple that I didn't really like, but I think Mitchell Evans at tight end is pretty good for Notre Dame. They had Riley Leonard over Will Howard, I think, just because he can do both, whereas Howard pretty much, only does one, although Howard's been exceptional, in my opinion, by and large. And I think a lot of areas you give, Notre Dame the edge, but I think more areas you give Ohio State the edge.
Go ahead, Mark. I see you want to jump on that one.
Well, bringing up both Howard and another name we've yet to bring up yet, when Steve talks about exploiting the Notre Dame defense, a guy named Jeremiah Smith. So Will Howard throws that pick in the third quarter, the first drive, and I didn't just have an issue with the decision. It was that he was locked in the whole time on the replay. He didn't try to look off the safety. And of course, the safety didn't turn out to be the issue, but the safety was shading that way. So you basically had three guys around Jeremiah Smith, the corner,
2.5 coverage,
shading. Then you had the linebacker did a great job of dropping and picking the ball off. So where do they get caught between possibly force feeding Jeremiah Smith or just saying, you know what, we got plenty of weapons. We're going to do what we did last game. And Carnell Tate stepped up a little bit. Nobody had a crazy good game. Even Ibuka was held to 51 yards on 5 catches, but just allowing that to be dictated to them or saying, we have to get this guy the football.
I don't think you need to force it to him. Now, Notre Dame's mainly a heavy man coverage team, and Leonard Moore, their cornerback, said that's what we're going to do. We're not going to change what we do. Texas is more of a zone team, so they're bracketing Jeremiah Smith. They had a corner on him. They'd have a safety over top, and sometimes they had like a linebacker just in the area as well. There were times that he was being triple covered, and so I don't expect Notre Dame to do that. They're going to do what they do. I think they will try to mix some things up. I don't think that you need to force it to Jeremiah, and I don't think they did in this last game. Will Howard made a bad throw on that one, and didn't see the linebacker. Overall, though, I think one of the reasons you didn't have anybody really blow up is because of all of the penalties. If you stop the penalties, then there are going to be bigger numbers. No holding, so now you no longer have like a 2nd and 22. Now it's just a 2nd and 10 or a 2nd and 2 or whatever. You're going to move the ball, and there's going to be an opportunity to move all the way down the field and pick up some numbers. And Carnell Tate's going to go over 100, and Emeka Ibuka at some point is going to, make a big play down the field. So I think Ohio State stopped that from happening with their penalties, and of course the interception didn't help. But I'm still struck by anybody choosing Riley Leonard over Will Howard in terms of this matchup, because you look at Will Howard in his 3 playoff games, 311 yards passing against Tennessee, 83% completion percentage, 319 yards against Oregon, 65 completion percentage, 289 yards against Texas, 73% completion percentage. These are all numbers that Riley Leonard, he threw for 90 yards in their quarterfinal win against Georgia.
Indiana.
Georgia in the second playoff game. He threw for like 90 yards. He rushes for some. Drew Aller ran the ball pretty well against Notre Dame, so it wouldn't surprise me if Will Howard would run the ball as well. He hasn't needed to run the ball because Ohio State's been running the ball and because they throw it effectively. Like Riley Leonard needs to run the ball because they need yards, and he does not throw it effectively. So the idea that, and again, Notre Dame could absolutely win this game, and Riley Leonard could absolutely be the quarterback that gets it done. But if you're choosing them, there is no way in hell Ohio State's like, yes, give us Riley Leonard. Please, can we have Riley Leonard over Will Howard? That's a ridiculous assertion.
Agreed.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The only thing, I think of again is he's got him to the championship game, running and throwing the football. He's the only quarterback in Notre Dame history to throw for 2,000 and rush for 800 in a season. And I agree. I think Notre Dame's run game's been a little bit, you went through the statistics, Tony, a little bit slowed up. Jeremiah Love suffered a knee injury, I think, in the Indiana game. And he also had the flu preparing for one of these playoff games. So he's been a little bit slowed up. Is he going to be that much healthier for this game? I don't know. But
he had an amazing 2-yard touchdown run against Penn State, an incredible touchdown run where he just kept fighting and fighting and fighting. So that just shows
that was a heck of a second half. I want to say that was one of the funnest games. Mm-hmm. And we're all sitting there. It's really funny, Mark. We're at the hospitality room, and it's this huge ballroom in this Westin hotel. And they've got TVs spread out about every 30 or 40 feet all around the room, like big screen TVs. And it was some type of weird internet. We always get this, Tony, when we go to these bowl games. It's some kind of weird internet television setup. I couldn't get Big Ten Network in my room, but they found it for me down there in the thing so I could watch Ohio State lose to Oregon in basketball. But the gist of it is every one of these TVs all around the room was at a different stage of the game. Like one of them was live. The next one was 20 seconds behind. The next one was 40 seconds behind. So you'd hear an ooh and ah over in one corner of the room, and then you're like, whoa, what happened? And then you got to watch your TV when it comes up to say, oh, no, what? No, I can't believe he did that. So, yeah, that was the kind of the gist that we were on was like we're getting delayed reaction, to what was happening in real time. And, it's too bad that one of those teams had to lose the game. People were like, well, who would you rather play, Penn State or Notre Dame? And I'm like, well, Ohio State's owned Penn State, hasn't lost to them since 2016. Franklin's 1-10 against Ohio State. It'd be like a foregone conclusion if you were playing Penn State who was going to win. And then somebody said, well, this would be the one that Franklin would finally win, is the one that matters. And I'm like, I don't know. And so then the other was Notre Dame. And like I said, great in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and the 80s. But for the two generations who've grown up now watching college football, they're just known as the team with the gold helmets that plays on NBC and never wins a big game. So I don't know. Is this as big a deal as if you were playing this game in 1990, you'd say, oh my God, there'll be 50 million people tuned in to watch this. This is the biggest thing in the history of the world. But in 2025, the casual fan, we'll see if they tune in. And Monday night sucks too. I want them to figure this out. And my feeling is they need to start the season a week earlier. It's a 13-week season. Everybody gets one bye week. Somewhere between week 3 and week 10, you get a bye week. And then you play the conference championship games the Thanksgiving weekend. You play the first round of the playoff December the 7th, first weekend in December. You play the second round, the quarterfinals, mid-December, and then the 20th. And then you play the semifinals at 5 o'clock and 8:30 on January the 1st. And the championship game is the Saturday or the Friday. Friday's a perfect night to play this. There's no NFL. The next nearest Friday night after 7 days is when the championships game's played, and it's over. And even go back to home fielded games in the first round and the quarterfinals too. I know that really knocks 3 of the big bowls out of the rotation, but screw them. It's kind of my feeling. We don't owe those people anything. So
did we squeeze those?
Go ahead.
Just going to say, did we squeeze those first round playoff games too close to Thanksgiving? if Thanksgiving's going to be like November 30th, aren't we going to give a week off to those teams or the conference championship games? Yes. Did you
Well,
work in a week off there?
no, because you got to get the middle round done in the middle of December before January 1st. So you're kind of, robbing Peter to pay Paul there. I don't know. If we kept the current system where the conference championship game winners, yeah, the losers of those games would really be screwed, have to come back 7 days later to play a game. But, I don't know. The human toll of this thing, they've added, all these games. They won't go back to 11 regular season games, which would be a perfect solution to it. You'd have an extra week to play with. But, yeah, I don't know. They to me, still playing on January the 20th makes no sense. But, that's where we're at.
You mentioned the human toll. Like, this is something that Ohio State has been preparing for since February. Like, this is a year in the making, playing 16 or 17 games. They've been preparing to play for 17 games. That's part of the reason they've not been an up-tempo team. They're trying to limit the exposures, the number of plays, the wear and tear. And now you look at Travion Anderson and Quinshon Judkins look as fresh as they did back in September. So, like, the plan has worked for Ohio State, even in losing 2 offensive linemen, whereas, like Notre Dame right now kind of limping in with their offensive line. So they're dealing with the same thing that Ohio State had to deal with. But this is something that they've been preparing for and gearing up for. And I think it'll be interesting to see if next year teams, do they follow Ohio State's plan of attack? And, how many teams were doing what Ohio State did? And was Ohio State what they did unique and how they prepared for this year? And will we see more teams kind of slow things down just because you're not trying to put too much on any of these players while they're, 21 years old and not trying to play 17 games in a short amount of time? But this is what they've all signed up for. This is what the money's for, as they always say. And the players are getting paid too. So I don't think you're going to see a lot of sympathy from anybody for the wear and tear and the toll.
Disputed National Champions. The link's in the description section, folks. Check it out. A look at the 1990s, but not just a history book. We propel all of those situations forward. All right. For me, Notre Dame has proven something in this. Of course, that Penn State Notre Dame was kind of who is elevated, who can push past the other, because neither one of them have won big games. But Georgia, Penn State, back-to-back. I will give Marcus Freeman the respect of, this is a new Notre Dame. This is his program. Let's see what they can do on the big stage. And so far, so good.
One of the things I was asking yesterday at interviews, we talked with Ryan Day and a handful of other players. Like, when you're facing a team like Notre Dame that just continues to find a way, like, what is the difficulty in that kind of opponent? And Ryan Day said, you have to do everything perfectly. You can't make mistakes. Like, that they're going to be able, they just take advantage of the things that you give them. So you've got to tackle well. The special teams, Notre Dame's going to try to steal a possession at some point. So you've just got to be aware of all of that. And when I asked Sonny Styles that same question about facing a team that finds a way, he said, when you say find a way, to me, that means you've got to match their will. You've got to match their physicality. And I just thought those were interesting terms. And so I wrote about it at BuckeyeHuddle.com, but they have to match Notre Dame's will. And I think if they match that will, the talent and everything else will take over. Like that, they've already got that advantage. You just have to match Notre Dame's inability to quit, which I think Ohio State has shown plenty of will in the playoffs. So it's not like this is something they're lacking in, but this is Notre Dame's greatest quality. So if you match that, then everything else will fall into place.
Donovan Jackson made a similar comment when asked about playing Notre Dame's front twice. He said, well, they pride themselves on being extremely tough, and they believe and show that they are probably more disciplined than you if you're not on point.
And Notre Dame will rotate some really good defensive ends in. They'll play 4 or 5 defensive ends, and watching these 3 games, they've all made big plays, and that's not even necessarily including the true freshmen that we may or may not see much of, but they all have guys that make plays as edge rushers. So Josh Fryer and Donovan Jackson are going to have to be ready.
Yeah, I look at it, and Ohio State played Notre Dame twice here in recent years. The last 2 seasons, it was 21-10 in Columbus, and Notre Dame was still kind of in control of that game till the middle of the third quarter when Ohio State kind of took over. And then last year, obviously, Kyle McCord was the quarterback, and he led that great drive down the field, converted a 4th down, and then they finally scored the touchdown, Chip Trayanum. Notre Dame apparently only had 10 people on the field, and he scores from 1 yard out on the, with 1 second to go. And so, you look at it, and if Ohio State doesn't take Notre Dame seriously, then they're not paying attention, because Notre Dame has played them pretty close the last 2 years. And, that's going to play to Notre Dame's favor, I believe, because their players will have the incentive and know that they can play with Ohio State and believe that they can win the game. They're going to go into the game with belief. So, we'll see if Ohio State matches their effort, their intensity, their physicality. Those are the 3 things in my mind. If Ohio State continues to play with a chip on its shoulder, they can't be beat. So, and particularly if they get Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka out in the open and hit a couple big plays, and now it's 14-3, or whatever, Notre Dame's going to be in a world of hurt.
So, Mark, with these games in mind, this being the 3rd time these 2 teams will play in 3 years, do you know which Notre Dame receiver has the most career receiving yards against Ohio State in this game?
Here's a clue.
He
does not play for Notre Dame. He plays defensive back for Ohio State.
It is Lorenzo Styles Jr.
Yes,
with 54 yards receiving back in 2022 to open that game against Ohio State.
Yeah, the first play or second play, whatever.
First play.
Yeah,
long time ago.
Great trivia question right there.
That is.
I was just going to make the comment, with this expanded playoff, the best teams in the country are going to keep running into each other, obviously more often. But on the other hand, we got this crazy transfer portal and guys are flying all over the place. So this may be somewhat of a unique situation with the regular season games lining up right before a playoff matchup, and these being 2 very veteran teams that a lot of these guys have been on the field against each other now for a 3rd time.
Well, that's fantastic. And then next year, Texas will be playing Ohio State back to back. Like their first game will be against Ohio State. So I think you will run into this more and more. And that's all we're looking for, just more good games, because we know schools are going to give us a bunch of crap games. So they need to be part of something that they have no say in the matter. Like, oh, gosh, I guess so now I've got to go to Tennessee in December. Well, okay. I'm not going to do it in September, though. You can't make me. So then we just have to force them into some good games in December and in January and get to enjoy those.
We've seen amazing defensive fronts in the college football playoff era at Clemson, Alabama, Georgia. These guys have been exceptional all year, but they're getting better and better and more dominant. And it's nothing that it doesn't seem to have a weak spot. They're getting pass rush from every position. When they don't get to the quarterback, of course, Jack Sawyer is, the modern day version of Too Tall Jones when it comes to batting passes down, but the other guys do it as well. Tyleik Williams was engaged in a block, and all of a sudden, boom, he throws up a hand at the right time, knocks down a pass. And of course, JTT has always been able to do that. They play the run. These guys, I don't know when an Ohio State defensive front has been this rock solid.
Well, when was the time it was this senior laden? Like you've got 3 true seniors and 1 fifth-year senior as your starting defensive line, and they can do all of that. And they're going to be knocking passes down again in this game because Riley Leonard will allow that to happen. But when you've got those guys, and the thing that I think has been really impactful, and they've not blitzed a ton in the playoffs, but they're changing pictures in the back end, and quarterbacks are holding the ball a little bit longer. And that's something we've always talked about with this pass rush, is just like they're almost there. They're almost there for 3 years. Like they're almost there. You can go back to Zach Harrison. He's almost there. And now they're able to get there because behind them, the pictures are just a little bit too difficult for defense, for quarterbacks right now. And you can credit Caleb Downs for being part of that mix. The way they use Jordan Hancock as a deep safety, and he can move all over the place. They have so many moving parts, and they're all veteran, that Jim Knowles can do a whole bunch of things defensively, including run a formation, a defense that they haven't even run this year against Texas in the biggest moments of the game. They can still pull stuff like that where everybody's like, we haven't done it in a game. You're going to call it now? Boom, let's do it. Well, we've got you. Like, they make plays down there. Go back to the Penn State game for Ohio State. Lathan Ransom jumping the route to Tyler Warren and eliminating that. Like, these are things that a sophomore safety that is not Caleb Downs is probably not going to do, and those plays don't get made. And so now you just gave up a touchdown. How are you going to answer? They don't have that. Chip Kelly was talking about how before the Jack Sawyer strip sack, like they're talking about how much time do we have left? What are we going to do? What do we like? What are we going to do on offense? Like, he's planning the drive, and then that happens. Like, well, I guess we don't need to worry about that anymore.
Absolutely. That was something else when that goal line stand. I'm sure if somebody keeps metrics on goal line stands, that in the 1970s, they were probably commonplace just because of the nature of football. But in this day and age, to put up as many goal line stands as this defense has,
I think that was the 7th one this year for Ohio State.
Yeah, against talented teams.
Yeah, Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, twice against maybe twice against Michigan. I don't know, but yeah, it was twice against Michigan. They had a run stuff and the interception on the goal line. So, I think Purdue was one of them, although that wasn't, a critical situation. And then I kind of likened it, you think about some of the great goal line stands. I put a story together looking at that Ohio State's had 1957 against Michigan. They stopped them at the 1 and went 99 yards the other way. The game was tied 7-7. They end up winning the game 21-7, go to the Rose Bowl, win the national championship. Obviously, C. Grant pressuring Ken Dorsey, Miami national championship game, last play, 4th down at the 1, was an example. NC State the following year, they stopped the running back at the 1-yard line, A.J. Hawk and Will Allen. There was one at Wisconsin, Ryan Shazier hit Monte Ball, trying to hurdle over the top, and he fumbled, and Christian Bryant recovered the fumble. So there's 4 of them that I could remember off the top of my head and put in there. I'm sure there's many others, but there were 4 right there. And as I said, they've done it 7 other times just this season alone.
Were you on the field or in the press box for the 1 in 57?
He was just a student.
Gleam in my daddy's eye.
Yakov showing up for us on this one, always going the historical route. Winning coach of this game, more accomplished than Bo Schembechler?
Sure.
I mean that is once you win a championship, you're on another level, and when you don't, you're always like, you are the most winningest coach without a national championship, which is, you're the winningest pitcher to never win a Cy Young or to ever win a World Series. It's like,
you're John
good
Chaffee
job,
Gene Katie.
But yes, you're
Frank
still
Beamer.
down here. You have to eat at the kids' table. If Ohio State wins this all, where will Jack Sawyer's strip sack and score? I guess the strip 6 that they're calling it. Where does that rank? Because that's up there with Holy Buckeye, and I don't know. Like you mentioned, the C. Grant play, like where it's a top 2 or 3 play in Ohio State football history, right?
No doubt. Yeah.
Because what else is there when you talk about biggest plays? I mean, you immediately think, at least I do, Holy Buckeye.
Elliott against Alabama.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, in games that mattered. We're not talking about in September the 8th against, Holyoke. We're talking about.
I don't care about Keith Byers kicking his shoe off against Illinois or whatever. Like, I don't know that really mattered. And that was not a championship season.
They were down 24 points, and I think they did go to the Rose Bowl that year, but
they won the Big Ten championship.
Yeah, I think that did matter a little bit.
Tony.
But it's like the shoe coming. It's
like a 20-year-old here.
Yeah, no, and that was not quite before my time, but I know of it. But in terms of because we're talking about championship seasons and like national title seasons.
Oh, we're talking about national team.
Well,
that.
It doesn't have to be
Big Ten championship seasons.
It doesn't have to be, but I think that creates a different
plays
level.
That held gravity. Yeah, the Curtis Samuel play beating Michigan was kind of cool. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, from 2014, the Joey Bosa hitting Hackenberg in overtime to preserve that game was big.
Sam Hubbard doing the similar thing with the year after or whatever as well against Penn State. David Greenshield mentioning the Maurice Claret's strip of Sean Taylor. I mean,
that was a good one.
But I think it has to have a name, doesn't it? Like, if your play doesn't have a name, can it really be a big play of all time? I don't know.
The triple S, Sawyer strip 6.
Yeah, Goff, in my book, Bo Schembechler still got the nod there. But we can't really even compare, in my book, Ryan Day and Marcus Freeman before they play this game. Now, Freeman elevates, obviously, with a win, but Ryan Day is much more accomplished than Marcus Freeman at this point.
No doubt.
All right, Steve, what do you have going on this week?
There's never enough time to do all the stories that you want to do. And I got a pack, and my anniversary was yesterday, and we're having a dinner for that tonight. So yeah, there's never enough days and time to get it all together. But we're doing the best we can. We're headed to Atlanta, and we're going to churn out as much preview stuff as we can leading into the game, and then churn out as much reaction stuff afterwards, and talk to as many people, and start the look toward 2025 at some point. But one of the things we talked about internally is just the transfer portal, how it's kind of taken over and dominated the sport. And you go out and buy what you need. And Ohio State's already added a running back, a couple of offensive linemen, and some other players that are going to help them kind of, build their starting lineup for next year. And, do they take a quarterback? That's a big question. Do you take a quarterback and, put them in there with Julian saying and say, go this spring and see who's the best one. So, or this summer or whatever. So, yeah, it's going to get real interesting. The Hot Stove League will be here before we know it. And for right now, just counting the days down till we get to Atlanta and play the game.
Steve, happy anniversary. I spent my anniversary last week in the airport. So just that time of year. And of course, Mark, if you're going to ask me what I've got coming up, I'll tell you a bunch of podcasts. And we did finished up our third of the Indiana or Notre Dame rewatches. And of course, we'll be dropping some listener questions episodes while we're on the road tomorrow, because it's hard to work while you're driving. So, and of course, we'll continue to have stories at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Like Steve said, like, there are so many stories you want to tell, and there's just not enough hours to get it done. But we're going to do our damnedest. We're all going to do our damnedest.
Yep.
I'll just be disappointed if there's not a Purdue game comparison between these two. They both played Purdue. Got to get that one in.
Prepare to be disappointed, Mark. That's all.
Who crushed the Boilers more?
Goodness.
66-7 or 45-0.
There's a reason jobs are open.
All right. Cheryl, thanks for being here. Happy anniversary to Steve and his lovely wife.
Yeah.
All right. We will convene next time after the national championship game, folks. So make it on back. Of course, we'll do the post-mortem of sorts. All right. Appreciate you being here. And of course, make it a destination here with ourselves, but also Tony at Buckeye Huddle and Buckeye Weeklies, the podcast, Steve, of course, at Bucknuts. You guys have a great and safe trip, and we'll see you soon.
Yep. Enjoy the game.